Professor Aguilar is an economist who teaches at UNC Chapel Hill and Duke, and he founded the Fiscal Challenge in 2013. My name's Erica Patella, and I'm the Fiscal Challenge's program coordinator, and we're excited to be in our 10th year of the competition. If you're a student and you still need to register for a team member, I'm going to share our registration survey in the chat. And as a reminder, first round proposals are due on Friday, March 10th. So we're going to record this webinar and post it on our resources webpage. Please feel free to chat and ask questions throughout the event. Thank you again, and I'll hand everything over to Dr. Aguilar.
All right, let me try to share a screen. Did that work?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to have a couple of screens up, so I apologize if I don't see everybody. I don't even see all the names, but thanks for dialing in. This is not a lecture, this is a workshop, so I want to get your fingers on keyboards. As Erica said, we'll make all the resources available later. Resources would be a PowerPoint deck, as well as some links to different FRED dashboards. I'll tell you more about what those are in a little bit, which are live on their site. The whole purpose is really to get you acquainted with this tool. Let me see if this works. All right. So there's really 4 steps to learning how to master FRED. You have to meet the guy, you have to learn how to chart with him, search his database, and then some of the advanced account features. Anyone who is dialing into this already knows what FRED is, otherwise you wouldn't even have been interested. It's a database of databases. So I'm not going to dwell on that intro right now. I'm going to purposely skip ahead a couple of slides and take you to what this workshop is really about, which is charting. Okay. If you want to master the skill of using FRED to chart data, warning, that's not the only way to chart data from FRED, but to master the skill of charting on FRED, there's 4 categories: types of graphs, formatting, finding, and then transforming. So here's what I did. I created 7 different charts, econ-related charts, that capture all the various elements of those 4 categories. So we're going to tonight, in about an hour's time or so, hands-on, you open up on your screen FRED, and we're going to step-by-step create 7 charts. By the end of those 7 charts, you'll know how to do all the basic features and quite a few of the advanced features of charting with FRED. All right, chime in at any point if I go too fast, if I go too slow. The more feedback you give me, the better. So again, I have the screens shut up, so I'm not sure how many people are here and how engaged you are, but question for you. How does the most recent inflation number compare to previous inflation cycles? That's a question that we need to address with a visual. Pro tip, never create a visual just to create a visual. Create a visual to answer a question. This is the question we're going to address with a chart. The chart has to be about some economic metric. Question for you, what's our primary metric for measuring inflation? Feel free to chat, open mic, as you wish. What's our primary metric for measuring inflation?
The consumer price index.
There we go. There we go. I don't see names, but who is that?
Chris.
Chris, thank you, my man. All right. So what I did was I put together a chart from FRED with the year-over-year rate of change in the CPI. We're going to create this chart together. We're going to learn how to transform a series, add a reference line, do some formatting, a couple of pro tips. Some are obvious now, some are not until we create it. When I'm answering this question, when I'm telling this story, I'm making comparisons to the past. These hash lines for the most recent observation are useful in that regard. The dots are helpful in that regard as well, to draw the reader's eye into what is the current observation. Also, recession shading is something I'll tell you about in just a moment. So I'm going to minimize this screen. Bear with me. I'm going to call up FRED browser. That's the URL. You could just, Google data FRED and the St. Louis Federal Reserve database pops up. So I would like you to open that up on your side right now. And what I'd like you to do is I want you to do CPI AUCSL. I'll leave it up there for a moment. I'd like you inside of the Fred search bar to type in that ticker. While you're doing that, Fred's database is enormous. It's difficult to find data. There's multiple ways to access it. We'll go through several. Right now, I'm just feeding you that ticker. That's the one I want you to grab, okay? Click enter and the consumer price index pops up. There's all sorts of measures of the CPI coming from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's the one I want to play with. Click on that and you get a chart. But this is not inflation. Remember, the motivating question was about inflation and inflation in this cycle compared to past. So what we want to do is first thing is make a transformation. Edit graph. That orange box is going to be your friend. Click on that. So there's different things that we can do once the edit line box is popped up, one of which is units. I want you to hit the little drop down and you see there's many different transformations. This is an index. So we can look at the units of change in that per period. How often is the CPI out? It's out monthly. If you didn't know that, you could see it's right there. So this would be the change month to month in the index. The change from last year in the index. The percentage change from last month, the percentage change from a year ago, and then various compounded annual rates of change. Click on percent change from a year ago. That's the one that we usually talk about. There we go. Most recent data point is 6.3. That's one of the key macro numbers you should always know. That's the most recent data point. Okay, so we're getting close. We're looking kind of like our CPI printout that we have here. Couple things though. I want to draw the reader to the most recent data point. I want to draw their attention to previous inflation cycles. So there's a couple things I want you to do here. Firstly, walk with me over here to add a line. Okay. Now we can add all sorts of things, but I want you to click this create a user defined line and then create line. Again, that's add line. Click on create user defined line and then create line. That's an ugly line, right? Okay, so we want to go to the most recent year-over-year percentage change, which was 6.3. So we're going to make it a straight line. We're going to put in 6.3. And everybody, I'm trying to go at a cadence where you can mimic and follow along in real time. If you need me to go slower, stop me. Questions, hit up chat or open mic. So we're getting close. It's still a little bit ugly, and I want to make sure the reader is seeing the fact that this is the most recent data point. It's out on a monthly basis. So let's walk the reader's visual to what we need. Go to format. A couple things. So first off, we could change the graph type. We could change stacking, recession shading. Let's shut that off. Why am I shutting that off? Recessions are for the macro cycle of economic activity and GDP. I'm talking about inflation cycles. I don't want to confuse the reader into thinking about one econ cycle for another. So I'm going to shut that off. Very helpful. Many people leave that on by default when you shouldn't. Next up, this user-defined line. This is a stylistic, not economic, stylistic. It's as thick and brighter than our main object of interest. I don't want to make the reader like really focus on that red line. I just want to use it as a reference. I want them to see these cycles. So scroll all the way down to the bottom where it says user-defined line, red line right there. I'm going to change the line type. I'm going to put it as, let's say, a dot. I'll make it a little bit, maybe thinner. That's cool. Okay. So now it's there and I could see it as a reference, but it's not my focus. Monthly data, I want to anchor them on what the most recent data point was. So I'm going to change the marker. Let's, maybe a circle. Oh, kind of ugly, too big, right? So you could change the width. There we go. Nice and pretty. And we have the CPI report. That's the one that we had on the screen. I'll talk to you in a little bit about how you can get that, grab that, download that, and use that in other settings. Let me pause. If you have any questions, you need me to rewind the tape, let me know. Let me see if I can get my screen up here. Do me a favor. For those of you who are here, if you're able to engage, give me a thumbs up if the cadence is appropriate for you, the timing. Yeah, awesome. Cool, cool, cool. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the slides. Again, I'm trying to make this hands-on. So hopefully my slide deck is still up and showing. If not, give me a shout out. But I went back to the slides. We're going to go to the next one. Next one. Every picture should answer a question. Every picture should be telling a story. In this case, was there a labor inflation trade-off in the quote-unquote COVID era? For my students of macro, what's the tool, concept, the model you should be thinking of when someone's saying this trade-off between inflation and the labor market? Feel free to hit the chat. Higher inflation, lower unemployment. There is a trade-off between the two, Ethan. Very good, very good. There's a name for it that we use in macro classes, and that's called Phillips curve. There we go. You got it. It was a little delay. It's called the Phillips curve. Very good. So again, I'm trying to cast these skills in the context of some of your macro training. Here's a Phillips curve. We're going to learn how to create a scatter plot. We're going to incorporate two series with different transformations. We'll change some of the marker styles, and there's some special nuances with scatter plots. Fred is great. It's free. It's a little buggy at times. So pro tip, really be careful as to which way the axes are set up. Now, if you remember your theory on the Phillips curve, on the vertical is inflation. On the horizontal is the unemployment rate. If we draw it the other way, those who are used to seeing it that way are going to be thrown off. So let's draw it with inflation, vertical, unemployment on the horizontal. I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to call Fred back up. Follow along with me if you want. We're going to create this. So let's go back to Fred's home screen. And this way, we're going to access data a little bit differently than before. We're going to go down to at a glance. This is my dashboard. I love this dashboard. In fact, I don't know if you could see my screen. In my home office, I got a whiteboard behind me, and I always keep a few key macro and market data items there. Every day I come in and update that. And GDP, CPI, unemployment rate, they're right there on Fred's dashboard. That's where I get them from. So to create the Phillips curve, I want you to click on CPI. Same number as before, showing you a different way to get to it. Okay, so that's the item. Now, we said it's a trade-off between inflation and the unemployment rate. So we're going to add a series by clicking Edit Graph. We're going to add a line. And we need to find the new series. Let me give you the ticker, UN rate. UN rate for unemployment rate. Again, you might say, like, how does he know that? I'll show you different ways to find the data. So I'm just giving it to you for now. Unemployment rate. Click that, and then you must add series. Cool. Okay. So now I have, both of the series overlaid in there. The Phillips curve is those two series, and it's a scatter plot. So let's make a scatter plot. Let's go to Format, Graph Type, and Scatter. That's Format, Graph Type, and Scatter. I hope you realize that this is not right yet. Okay, so think about it, right? It's the trade-off between inflation, just like Ethan said, inflation and the unemployment rate. This is not inflation. This is the CPI. from which inflation is derived. So we need to transform the series. Go to edit plots. We have to find the first series. So let's go edit plot 1. There we go. It's the CPI, but we need the year-over-year percentage change again. We did that before. So click on units, percentage change from a year ago. That's not change from a year ago. That's not percentage change. It's percentage change from a year ago. That's the way it's always quoted to us in the press. All right, so trap. Don't fall into this trap. Copy to all. Fred can be buggy sometimes. Sometimes it does that automatically. But if I copy to all, I'm going to do it by mistake. Don't do it. Okay, don't do this. I'm going to click copy to all. Oh boy. Okay, so consumer price index is on the left, year-over-year percentage change. You can see that from the axis title. Unemployment rate is on the bottom, percentage change from a year ago. So that's the trade-off between inflation and the change in unemployment. That's not what the Phillips curve is about, right? So that's why that's a mistake. So I'm going to go back and fix that. It's the units. It's just a percent right there. Come on, Fred. There we go. Okay, so that's getting better. Now, a couple things. I don't want all this period, right? I said in the COVID era. So let's see if we can change the horizon a little bit. We could go back a year. We could go back 5 years. Or we can just click in whatever date we want right there. You know, we could click in 29, December 2019, before everything went awry. Okay. Now, you could do all sorts of stuff. This isn't about the econ. This is about the formatting. You could go ahead and change the way it looks. So I clicked on the edit graph, format, and I could change the color if I want. Now, here's the pro tip, my experience. This doesn't work. See where it says y-axis position, left or bottom, move up or move down? Those usually work when it's time series overlaid, but not when it's a scatter. I've had terrible difficulty. So the pro tip is not to just randomly put stuff in there and then attempt to change the axis position. Like, let's say if you had unemployment on the vertical and CPI on the horizontal. Oh, whoops, wrong way. Let me flip it, right? It's hard to do that after the fact inside of Fred. So always start with the one on the vertical axis first. That's just my suggestion. But now I could go ahead and I can make the changes. Another weird thing is like, look at this, right? It's got two different colors, but they're all one color because it's a scatter plot. So I'm going to call that red. And look at that. We got the Phillips curve. Now, one thing that I want to mention is that unlike, let's say, if you're in R or Python, like maybe you're doing a GG plot, when you have the tooltips, you're usually able to see what the exact date is. You get the values here, but not the exact date. See how when I'm scrolling over them, it gives me the left value and the bottom value, but not the date at which that occurs. So it's a great tool, but there are limitations. Okay, we got number 2 with skills, Phillips curve. Questions? Right. Let's go back. Next up. Has the gap between the two surveys within the jobs report closed since the end of the recession? I'm not sure if anyone in the audience maybe has or is going to participate in the Fed challenge, not the fiscal challenge, but a close cousin of ours is the Fed challenge. And in that, a common question that's posed by the judges is, you know, in the jobs report, which are the two surveys? There's actually 2. I'm not going to bombard you and test you on this, but there's 2 of them. There's the household and the establishment. And the story has been that the gap between those two to measure the health of the labor market had been diverging since the recession, the COVID recession ended. And people were wondering, well, why are they different? Is that a signal that maybe the labor market is not actually as strong as we say that it is. So let's monitor the gap. So I went ahead and I grabbed two measures of employment from the same report. We're going to learn how to overlay two time series, create an index with those series. All right. So come and walk with me to Fred. Let's go back to the home screen and we're going to enter in the ticker. The ticker is going to be CE16OV. Again, that is CE16OV. That's not a zero. And that should give you the employment level. Click on that bad boy and you get a level of the number of jobs filled in the economy as measured by the household survey. We want to do the same concept, but from the other survey. So we're going to click on the edit graph and go to add line. And the ticker is pay EMS. PAYEMS. PAYEMS. All employees, total non-farm payrolls, add the data series. All right, so we got two series all lined up and they look pretty similar. Thank goodness they should be similar. They're trying to measure the same thing, but they do it from different surveys. If they were very different, we would have an issue, which is exactly why that question was posed. So now the way the question was posed was during the COVID era. So, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back like maybe 5 years. Okay, pretty good. You can see the big gap down and then the big recovery. But this is saying since the end of the recession, I would need to take the point at the very bottom from each, compare it to the point that we've seen most recently, and then on my calculator and piece of paper compute the differences. I could do that all in Fred. So, edit graph. Right. Units. All the way down to index. Very last one. Now, Fred is very flexible here. You can index from any given point in time, but I want to leverage recessions. So you click on this, and they have the official NBER recession dates. I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to put from the start of the recession. And then I'm going to click copy to all. All right. Looks pretty good, right? This is an index chart. Maybe you've heard the term event study before or impulse response. Now, the thing is, well, look, this is equal to 100 for both blue and red at the same point at the very start of the recession. But the question was, since the recession ended, make sure that the story, the question, and the answers are all working together. So let's go back to edit graph. Let's go back to the end of the recession and copy to all. Copy to all. All right. Now, what's great about this is that you could do some low-level EDA, exploratory data analysis, right from the graph. With this index value, I can compute how much employment has changed from the household survey just by doing this. Watch. So we can see at the bottom of the recession, it equals 100. We did that. That's by de facto, right? We manufactured that. Let's go all the way to the most recent data point. Look at the blue line. It's 120.2. So what does 120.2 mean? 120.2 divided by 100 minus 1 times 100, that's 20.2%. So household employment has increased around 20% since the end of the COVID recession. Meanwhile, employment from the establishment survey has grown by about 18.9% since the end of the recession. The gaps had been different and bigger, especially early on. Look at that gap, 112 to 109 on a relative basis. That was larger. So that was where some of the concern came, and now it's closing. Very powerful to have these index values. What it cannot do is actually do a pure event study where we have multiple time series from different periods overlaid and indexed at the same point. So I can't compare the COVID recession to the Great Recession to the Great Depression all on one graph inside of Fred. You can export the data and do that in Excel or Python, MATLAB, Julia, as you wish. All right, so index values, super powerful to tell a good story. Let me pause. Any questions?
Hey, Professor Aguilar. Quick question.
Wait, is that Gray?
This is Gray.
Oh, wow. How you doing, man?
I took advantage of you opening this up for anyone that wanted to join.
Awesome.
Okay, so you have it as the end of the recession currently, which works out nicely that both surveys just happen to be very close values at that point. But if you were trying to index it to, like, say, January of 2018, where there was a separation between the two values, can you choose which survey you index to 100?
Yes. So we could change it so that they're both at different points. I'm just screwing around so you can see what I'm saying. So one could be indexed, the other one doesn't have to be.
Okay.
But the purpose of the indexing is to put both of them at the same starting point so I can measure percentage changes. So the fact that they are different at that level, if we go to any other point in time, I think to your point, right, we could go all the way back to, one of these points in, the pre-Great Recession where there was a big gap. What will happen is you're actually bringing the blue and the red line together. That's the methodological imperative here. That's what we're trying to do. It doesn't matter if they're close or far away. Thanks for asking that. All right. Anybody else? Awesome. Okay. Next up, again, put together a series of questions for you all. Every story should have this visual. Every visual should be prompted by a story. Which components of overall economic activity have been adding the most in the last year? Overall economic activity, GDP. I would tend to think anybody who's dialing into a call like this knows GDP is the measure of overall economic activity. Skills for this: 1, stacked bar plot. 2, how to find data on Fred when it's not obvious how to do so. Here's what I mean. There's millions of data series inside of Fred, and many of them have names that differ from the original manufacturer. GDP is produced by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. They put out a nice quarterly report with monthly updates of GDP, and they have their own names. The mnemonics inside of the Fred database don't always match those names. So if you see a news report come out and you're searching for something that the news report uses when they're quoting the BEA, you can't just automatically look that up on Fred. It doesn't always work. So then you run into this whole game about, well, which series is it? So many sound similar. What's nice is that one way to organize the series on Fred is by the data release. So let me walk you back to Fred. Let's go to the home screen. And up at the top here, we've been using the search bar. Awesome. We use this at a glance. Awesome. Popular series, latest releases. You can look at different categories. Release calendar. I want you to click on release. Okay, everybody got that? On that front page, click on release. Now there's dozens and dozens and dozens of different releases. We're looking for GDP. I happen to know that's on the third page. You just scroll down next, next, next to the third page of that giant list. And the second entry there is gross domestic product. Okay, so if you're following along, that's the one. Don't get tricked. It's not these others. They sound similar, but they're not. Gross domestic product. All right, now, if you go to the BEA, they have this big PDF with different sections. Okay, so we're going to go to section 1, domestic product. And they have a whole bunch of tables. Now, if you forgive me, let's take a little field trip. I go to the BEA. Happened to be that the latest number came out today. So let's go to the current release. And I got a PDF here. You don't have to follow along with this. I just want to show you. This is the PDF that the reporters were talking about today. It's the Newswire. It's all over Bloomberg. And they have, look at this. I mean, pages and pages and pages and pages of stuff. Where do you look? Where do you look? Contributions to the percentage change in real gross domestic product. So this is how much it went up in total, 2.7%. 0.93 percentage points were due to consumer. 0.66 percentage points were due to investment. 0.46 were due to net exports and 0.63 due to government spending, C plus I plus G plus NX. So let's say you got this, right? Or your boss or your client asked this, like, okay, can you chart these out for me? You want to take a screenshot of this? No. Okay, find it on Fred. How? I want to go to table 2. So it's section 1, table 2, 1.1.2, contributions to percentage change in real gross domestic product. That's the cadence for search. All right, so we got a quarterly number. There we go. And we want the CIGNX, yeah? We got the C. I want you to click follow me. 2, that's personal consumption expenditures. I want you to click on I, that's line number 7, that's investment. I want you to click on 15, which is net exports. And lastly, I want you to click on 22, which is government spending. CIGNX. All right, so that's 2, 7, 15, 22. Add to graph. All right, at the bottom, add to graph. We got a big old mess. It's accurate, but we got a big old mess. We got the numbers way over here, 0.93, 0.46, 0.63, 0.66. Those were the numbers that we just quoted. But remember, the story was the last year, during the last year. So let's put this to a 1-year horizon. That doesn't really tell the story about being able to visualize these contributions. So we're going to edit graph. And we're going to format. And we're going to change the visual device for the reader to make them comprehend. We're going to use a scatter. Pardon me. Bar. Stacked bar. So we went a graph type of bar, and then stacking option pops up. And there's 2 different types. There's a percent type and a normal type. Let me show you what percent is. So the vertical axis here is percent, the total growth rate. And you can see each of these pieces are stacked up to add to 100%. So from that, you can see, I'll hover over it, right? Tooltips are on. Around 34.7% was due to the blue, which is consumer. 23.5% of that growth rate was due to government spending, etc. But that's not the percentage points to growth. So I'm going to put this as normal. And now this says the total was 2.7%. And you can see 0.93 of those 2.7 percentage points was due to the consumer. Right, so let me take a step back. And you can see that nice and neat. Very powerful. Bars, stacked bars. 2 options, normal or percent. Once again, my friends, let me know if you got questions. All right. And please, please, please tell me if I'm going too fast. We're making great progress. Okay, next up. Does labor market balance suggest higher employment costs? So, we're economists by training, right? Labor market balance. Every market has an equilibrium. Every market has a supply and demand. Labor market supply. Let me get your opinions. How do we measure the supply inside of this marketplace? How do we measure supply in the labor market? Thank you, Ethan. So unemployment rate would give us a measure of that disequilibrium between supply and demand, but not just the supply. Let me give you let me push in the right direction. The labor force is a proxy for the number of people that are available to work. So then if we have labor force as supply, we need labor demand. So we could look to, okay, well, how many people are actually working? That's a sign of labor demand. But then there's another piece, right? There's the demand for labor jobs by companies that are not yet filled, right? So there's the demand for labor from businesses for those that they have been able to fill and those they haven't been able to fill. So that means I need to create a formula that tracks the net supply demand balance where demand is a positive two different things. And then I need to relate that to the health of the labor market's price, which is employment costs, both wages as well as salaries and fringe benefits. There's a lot going on here. So this is one of my favorite charts that I track on a regular basis for the health of the labor market. There's some controversies over some of the sources as to whether or not they're still appropriate, but by doing this, we can create a formula, transform two series, dual axes, frequency aggregation. We'll learn a lot from this one. All right, come back to Fred with me. Let's go nice and clean. Let's go to the front page. And we're going to start with forming the demand for labor. So for that, let's go to the one we said before, which was the payrolls. P-A-Y-E-M-S. All right. So that's one part of labor demand. That's the number of job that employers wanted that are actually filled. But we want to add to that those that are unfilled. So there's a report called the JOLTS report, Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. We want the openings. Those are the ones that they have posted on ZipRecruiter and such. Edit graph. Do not add a line. What we want to do is go down here and where it says customize, we want to put in a new series. We're going to learn to make a transformation. So what I want you to do is type in JTSJOL. JTSJOL, job openings. JTSJOL. Add that series. Okay, you think you did something wrong because the graph isn't really changing, you don't see it. You're good, you're good. A and B, they're both there. If I combine those two, I add those two, I have a measure of labor demand. Okay, but I also want labor supply. And I want the net gap between the two. So we're going to add in another series here. Again, go to where it says customize data right down there, and we're going to put in CLF16OV. CLF16O, not 0, OV. That's the labor force like Ethan and I were just talking about. And add that one. It looks like I didn't add anything. It didn't work because I don't see it on the graph. You're all good. A, B, C. Two measures of demand, one measure of supply. How do I combine them? Various ways you could do that. I want you to go down here where it says formula. Very flexible. You could do all sorts of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So we're going to add together A and B to get total demand. That's the payrolls and openings as our proxy of demand. And we're going to divide that by C, which is our measure of labor supply. So if that number goes up, that means demand is bigger than supply. That number goes down, that means demand is shrinking relative to supply. And we're going to apply that formula right there. Perfect. Net labor supply, demand, and balance. That number is going up. That means that we have more demand than supply. Okay, the question was, how does that labor market imbalance relate to payrolls, prices of labor? So we're going to add a line now. All right, now we're going to add a line And we're going to look towards not wages only, but the employment cost index, which captures wages and salaries. So it's a bigger cross section. ECI WAG. ECI WAG. ECI WAG. Okay, that's an index value, not very useful. I want to look at the rate of change. So we've done this several times. Units, percent change from a year ago. Got it? I don't want to copy it all. Don't do that. But when you take a look at the graph, it's really hard to see the movements in the blue line because the units are different, right? One's a year-over-year percentage change. The other is this like one number, right? If it's one and they're in balance. So this is where dual axes could come in handy. Let's go to format. And if you go blue line, red line, y-axis, y-axis, let's put one of these on the other axis. Let's put the employment cost index on the right-hand axis. And, you know, we can change the color however we wish. Pretty good. Now, there's something here that still doesn't feel right. So the employment cost index comes out on a quarterly basis. The jobs report comes out on a monthly basis. Fred is smart enough to be able to overlay those two series and keep it temporarily aligned. But let's say if you want to smooth it out, we're going to go back to the blue line, which is our labor market proxy. And we're going to do some frequency aggregation. Model frequency. Click on that. It's at monthly, which means we could aggregate up to quarterly, semi-annual, annual. We cannot disaggregate to weekly or daily. So you can only go up, can't go down in that way. We're going to put it to quarterly, and there's different ways to aggregate. For now, we're going to put this as the end of the period, but makes minor differences between the two. Did you see how the blue line smoothed out to be similar to the green line? So we aggregated the frequencies between the two. So you take a look at this, and the question was, like, what's the net labor supply demand situation saying about the price of labor? Blue line's going up, green line's going down. They have to meet at some point. Either wages are going to kick up dramatically, or the labor market either is too strong or will get weaker. That's the story that comes from this chart. Every chart should be used to answer a story. All right, my friends, we have 2 more to go. Let me know if you got any questions on this one. This was the most complicated we've done thus far, so I'm happy to rewind and explain. Nothing yet? All right. Going to go back to the PowerPoint slides. The audience is potentially broad. This particular sponsorship is through the fiscal challenge. So I wanted to throw in some fiscal stuff. Federal outlays and receipts. How do they impact the deficit? So think about the audience. They're talking about the deficit. We know the deficit is the stuff coming in and the stuff going out. We want to make sure we craft a visual that has this notion of inflow, outflow, positives, negatives. So I went ahead and I grabbed the federal receipts and the outlays as a fraction of the size of the economy. We're going to learn how to create a bar chart, invert the axis, format the background, do some coloring on different pieces. I want to get rid of some of these complicated axes. Bars are awesome for telling stories about discrete points in time. So let's go back to Fred. And I want you to click in FYONET. 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 Fiscal year outlays net. Millions of dollars, pretty good. Okay. And what I want to do is get that as a fraction of GDP. So I'm going to click on Edit Graph. And we did a transformation before, but I want to practice. So let's go FY GDP. FY GDP, fiscal year gross domestic product. That's the one that's on the same calendar frequency as the fiscal. So the fiscal series of net outlays. All right, so we got that, and let's add that one. Cool. Okay, now we need to make some transformations to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide that, A divided by B, right? So that's outlays divided by GDP. That sounds right, yeah? 305%? That can't be right. You with me on that? That can't be right. The issue is this. Take a look at the help. Millions of dollars, billions of dollars. I need to make an adjustment to that, right? So in our formula, we could do that adjustment. See that there? A divided by the quantity B times 1,000. There we go. You notice how the shape of the line didn't change. All we did was scale it. It was a units issue. It wasn't a momentum issue. So we got two series, A divided by B times 1,000. Now we have outlays as a percent of GDP. Our audience is interested in outlays and receipts. So let's add a new line. Again, stop me if I'm going too fast, guys. Add a line. And we're going to have here FY, FR, federal receipts. Again, it's annual. That's the fiscal cycle. So we're going to use that. And we're going to add that data series. I also want to convert that to GDP. So I'm going to add on, again, FY, GDP. FY, GDP, once again. Add that. If you're ever unsure about what the tickers are, you can see them directly inside of those greenish areas, the pea soup. And I want to do the transformation again to get a GDP. And take a look at that right there. See that? It's already stored for you. A divided by the quantity B times 1,000 and apply. Awesome. Okay, now these are discrete periods of annual events. I don't want to think about it as a continuum. Visually, I want them to see each year as distinct, different regimes, different political cycles. So let's make this into a bar chart. A couple things here. The data is accurate, but remember, it's an inflow versus an outflow. This doesn't really tell the story of inflow versus outflow, which is bigger, which is smaller. So we're going to make a transformation to one of the series by inverting the axis on one of them. Here's how we do it. So let's think about it. We have two of them, and the red is the receipts, the blue are the outlays, the way they're set up right now. Outlays, negative, leaving. So let's actually augment this to do times -1. We're going to make our outlays as a percent of GDP negative because they're leaving our account, right? Let's apply that. Awesome. Now I could start seeing a balance. I could start seeing visually for my audience what's coming in and what's going out. Now, colloquially in the US, right, you think about the way that we're raised, the stoplights, green and red, what's coming in, what's going out. So let's change these colors to be more conforming to what our audience is expecting. Format, outlays are in the red. Our books are in the red, as they say, right? And then the receipts are in the green. Beautiful. And you could do all sorts of stuff to make this prettier. One of the things that I want to do is take a look at this axis here. That's just ugly, right? I mean, to a human, that's meaningless. Now, unfortunately, Thread does not have the capabilities to edit that axis, but you can get rid of it. See, show axis titles, gone. Pro tip, get rid of it. If it's confusing, just get rid of it. And then when you embed this inside of PowerPoint, then you can edit it there. And then you could also change the background graph frame, and you could change the color to whatever formatting style that you might like. All right, so that was another complicated one. Visually, I want you to always use graphs to tell the story to the audience and the way the audience is going to see it. What it cannot do, though, is edit these things either, unfortunately. You can get rid of those titles, but you can't edit them. All right. We're doing great time, and we got one more to go. But again, everybody who's dialed in, let me know if you got any questions. This was a complicated one. All right. All right. All right. All right. Last one in terms of the skills I want you to develop is actually to create a map. Where is the U.S. labor market the strongest? So in Fred, actually, they have a lot of financial data, macro data, time series data, and geospatial data. So we're going to create a map. Now, the first thing to think about is like, holy cow, that means I need, like all of these different series, one for each state or county or whatever it is. No. Fortunately, the way the Fred does this search is really smart. So check this out. Come back to Fred with me. Let's go to the home screen and let's type in the ticker CAUR. California unemployment rate. We could have picked North Carolina, Texas, whatever. CAUR. Unemployment rate in California. Click on that. Okay, so we have a time series of the unemployment rate. This series, being that it's a state level, is tagged to have a geo reference. And any in their database that has a tag for a geo reference allows you to create a map. So it's really super simple. Just view map, boom, you have the whole thing. It updates automatically to the most recent period. You can change the date if you like. And you have nice tooltips as well. By default, you can hover over them and see what they are. Now, unfortunately, you can't do many transformations. So for example, if you remember from your macro classes, maybe you're thinking about, well, I want to compare this to the NAIRU or something like that, to the natural rate of unemployment. So I'm going to look at, every state relative to the overall NAIRU, A minus B. Don't go ahead and mimic this. And I'm going to apply that. Oh boy, okay, I did it. I got the California unemployment rate relative to the NAIRU. So I could see if it's above or below. And now I'm going to get out of here and, oh wait, the map is gone. Once you start these transformations on indicators that don't have the geospatial tag on them, the ability to map is gone. So the amount of limitation, there's a limitation to the amount of transformations you can make inside of here. Another example, again, you don't have to follow along. Let's say we don't want it as the percent. Let's say we want it as the change in that from a year ago. The units are percent, and I want the change in those units from a year ago. Okay, so the California unemployment rate is 11.4 percentage points higher in the first quarter than before. That is still only referencing stuff with the geospatial mapping, so that can be moved over to a map framework. And it does that for all of the series. Right, so there's some nuances there. When you have any tag inside of the Fred database with the geospatial mapping, you can make transformations to any other that has a geospatial mapping, but nothing that's macro that does not have that mapping, like we said with the NAIRU. All right, let me get out of here and put that back so you can see how this matches. Exactly what we set out to do. That was the last of the 7. Questions on that one before we wrap up? All right, so let me show you what I have for you in terms of resources, because you may not have been able to follow this in real time. And I know quite a few folks were requesting the video and other materials. So here's what happens. I'm going to give you tools for exporting, ways to search the Fred database as well. We talked about a few of them here, all directed for you. By the way, the Fred search bar, in my opinion, not very good. Just Google it. Google Fred and then the mnemonics that you need. They have a calendar there. It's not the best econ calendar, but it does show you some of the major events. Browsing by category is very helpful. They have this tremendous macro snapshot, which provides you with tools that are updated on a regular basis. For those of you that want to get advanced with Fred, they actually have accounts where you can use your Google address or whatever it is, your Gmail, to create an account and save stuff. What you can do is save data lists. Pro tip, create a Fred account. Don't waste time hunting for the same series every month. Find them once, save them on Fred, and then go back to them. You can get the actual data series and just download it, or you can create a dashboard. And I show you in the slides how to do these accounting features, add to the data list or add to a dashboard. I actually want to show you what a dashboard looks like, and I'm going to make this available to everybody. So this is on the Fred website. This is on my account, and I made this dashboard public. You can go right now to this URL, and you should be able to see. Maybe, let's see if I could do this quickly. I could put that in the chat. And I put into the chat for you, and you can see this dashboard. You could do all sorts of stuff, right? So you could put in some notes. You could put in like a dashboard of key indicators that you want. Also, here are each of the 7 key data series that I showed you. For each of them, what you can do is you can click on them, you can look, I highly recommend viewing them on Fred in another tab to make sure that they're updated. You hit max to make sure you have all the recent data. You could also download the data directly. What I like doing for this is for all my key indicators, then if I don't want to remember what was a transformation, you could put notes right there for yourself. Right? So all 7 of them are there for you. You should be able to get to them at any time. Here we go. Anything before we part?